Well, I guess the Nuggets were stumbling down at the end of last season, so why not try that one again? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last episode of this regular season of the longest tenured Nuggets spin off podcast in the world. Welcome to DNVR Nuggets' Serbian Corner. My name is Miroslav and I would like first to give a shout out to the first batch of Serbian Corner monthly supporters. I've opened the Patreon page for the show at patreon.com/MiroslavCuk, where you can choose a tier and support the show more directly than ever before. I, of course, appreciate the thumbs up on YouTube videos and sharing the shows on social media. All of it helps immensely. So the first ever Patreon shout out goes to Alec Gwynn, Will Jones, Voja Medic, Griff Black, Ray Martinelli, Nick Barron, Peter Plummer, also known as the famous Devin Booker hater, Leontine, Jeff Scanlon, and Nathaniel. Thank you for supporting the show and helping future projects. The week behind us started with the first night of a back-to-back in Salt Lake City. Nikola Jokic was 1-12 in the capital of Utah going into this game, with seeding implications involved in the game as well. Two things happened. Jazz openly tanked this game by not playing their best players, and Jamal Murray was really freaking good. He opened his great individual game with an explosive dunk in the first quarter and ended it with 3 consecutive three-pointers in the fourth. Those 2 quarters were also the reason why the Nuggets finally won a game in Utah. 2-12, baby. 20-something hours later, both the Nuggets and their visitors, the Minnesota Timberwolves, flew into town to face off in a game that was deciding who is getting number 1 seed in the West, we thought at that point. And the opponent that would qualify after 2 elimination games in the play-in, so basically a free win in game 1 of the first round series. Both teams came to play. Karl Anthony Towns was still out for the Wolves, but that didn't look like a big problem for them because Naz Reid slid into the starting lineup and he was having a great season so far. All the Nuggets were available for this game, but they were trailing for most of second and third quarters. Even though the starters had a pretty good game, it was the young roommate duo that broke this game open. Incredible energy from Peyton Watson, who ended up with 6 blocks and 4 assists, and Christian Brown, who only had 9 points, but among those were 2 incredible dunks, one of them in the face of the saddest person on the court that night, Rudy Gobert. Rudy gave his all and was amazing defensively for most of the game, but at the end had to look at Nikola's 41, 11, and 7 and ask his coach why he wasn't allowed to say, "I got him, man," and guard Joker one-on-one. The Nuggets won pretty comfortably, even though they had only 3 guys in double figures, with Jamal's 20 and Mike's 18. 2 days later, the second to last game of the season versus the Spurs in Texas. The best team in the West versus the worst team in the West. What could possibly go wrong? The Nuggets, of course, had a 23-point lead in the third, then almost caught it all up with sloppy play on offense and Wemby turning into Steph Curry for a brief moment. They did fight it off and had a 13-point lead before the last break. The bench mob actually held the fort after that, but then the starters had an abysmal last stint. 121-120 for the Spurs. A loss that will probably cost the Nuggets the number 1 seed, and for me, even more importantly, the franchise record of 58 wins in a single season. Jokic had a great first quarter and then refused to shoot until the end. Jamal was on fire on offense but didn't run back. Very disappointing. Play with fire, and fire is gonna make 46% of its threes and slap you in the face. Oh, and not scoring off your bread and butter 4 times in clutch will also hurt you, probably. All right, that's enough of the recap of the week. It is time to bring in my guest for today. It is the end of the regular season, so it is a great time to get some outside takes about the Nuggets and the league at large before the play-in and playoffs. You know him from his great pieces for the Bleacher Report and also for his relentless work on the Hardwood Knocks podcast, where he gives extremely measured and informed takes on all the teams in the association, except for your team because he hates your team. Calling from New York, New York, it's Dan Favale. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Miroslav, and as always for the spectacular introduction.
Listen, I know I'm a jack of many trades, but I'm trying to hone that one perfectly because if I get the introduction well, then people tend to come back. So
everyone likes their ego strokes, especially me. So I appreciate the introductions.
What's up? What's new on Hardwood Knocks? What can we expect?
Well, we just put out our final awards ballots. I won't spoil who won MVP except to say that it was Jokic.
Okay, thank
and
you.
We have our all league, so all NBA, all defense, all rookies coming out on Monday. And then we're going to look back, I think, right after the regular season ends and do the thing. This one we're excited about, the one thing we got wrong about every single team. And then we'll have our playoff previews up once all the matchups are set. We're not going to really dig to, like, the playing kind of messes with that, and previewing playing stuff is if you cover, if you have a Nuggets podcast and they were in the play-in, which they're not, go ahead and cover those games. But we're not into the individual game type of coverage. So those will be the stuff that's coming down the pipeline for us.
Yeah, you mentioned your MVP pick, Nikola Jokic being one. It's an interesting question that was in my head last night after the Nuggets wet their bed against the Spurs, because all of a sudden they can drop all the way to the 3rd seed, while Luka Doncic and Dallas Mavs are a 5th seed. Now I do realize there's like a 7 or 8 game gap between those 2 seeds, but still it's not as big of a gap as it was before. Did you have any doubt that this kind of outcome could swing some voters when the push comes to shove?
So the ESPN straw poll that Tim Bontemps does is just always so telltale, it feels like, for the MVP award. And he was so far out in front that I have a tough time believing that drop would really impact him. I guess with Luka and the Mavs coming on, if you look at the seeding and the Mavs are 4 and the Nuggets are 3 and OKC is 1, I would say I think you can make a case of those 3. And I was in this camp with Giannis for a little bit pre-injury. Hopefully he's going to be fine with that calf strain. But I think any of those 3 could realistically win. My whole thing is I don't like the arguments, and we've seen a lot of it in our YouTube comments. I see it in the BR section all the time that just says, well, what does Luka have to do? He doesn't have another all-star on the team. Or it's the same thing with SGA. And it's like, well, Jokic doesn't have another all-star on the team. And then they'll come back and say, well, Jamal Murray's all-star caliber. And then it's, well, what is Kyrie Irving? What is Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren? So I don't like that type of argument. And what I hate about the MVP discourse, and I'm sure I am guilty of this, is everything turns into a referendum on what the other guys don't do, rather than let's appreciate what they're all doing, but who stands out the most. And when it's this close, and I do think it's close, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander honestly might be the best two-way player in the NBA. Luka Doncic is probably rivaling Jokic right now for the most valuable offensive player in the NBA, even though I wouldn't say that. I look at Nikola Jokic, and the things that swing it for me is that, yes, we all know about the on-off splits. I think those matter more now because we've established that the Nuggets are not just a contender, but a champion. So he's not just what makes them from bad to really good. He's their lifeline to title contention. And neither Shai nor Luka can actually say the same thing just yet, because those teams, I guess the Mavs recently made a Western Conference Finals. Like, we now have that evidence that this is what Jokic is doing because this is what the Nuggets are. On top of that, though, the actual things that swing it for me, Jokic is better on defense than Luka. And so if you think their offense is close, and it's close, I still think Jokic is more valuable. Jokic is the better, he does more work on defense. He does. And then with Shea specifically, Jokic is more important to, or has a larger impact to me on his offense, on what the Nuggets do. Like, Shea is the more aggressive scorer, but Jokic has a very versatile scoring package and is by far the better passer. But that's my preference. So if you want to make a case because Jokic has won it twice and like the Thunder ahead of schedule and look at the impact that Shea is having, or just look what Luka is doing where, okay, Kyrie's an all-star, but he's not really playing in a ton of games or enough to be an all-star. That is, I think, the hardest part. It feels like there are very thin margins here, but if you pick someone, it's always interpreted as, and I won't get this on this show because it's a Nugget show, but well, why would you disrespect Luka like that? And it's having Luka second or third on my MVP ballot is not a sign of disrespect. And if anything, we should just appreciate that it is this much of a debate when all of these guys are so darn good, to where it's, and if Joel Embiid never got hurt, it would be even like an even wilder debate. So I try and appreciate it from that perspective, but I think invariably I even end up doing the thing where it's, well, these guys don't do this and Jokic does, and this is why I'm picking Jokic.
Yeah, as you said it well, even if a guy gets like 85 first place votes, that doesn't mean that there's a huge gap between him and the other candidates. So I agree. We have really three really great candidates this season. I would say actually four, because I think Giannis is having an underrated season because the season of the Bucks is pretty nightmarish, and he has his own piece of that, to be completely honest. But his numbers are actually pretty great. And
they're historical.
Impact,
and it's just, I think the thing with him is that we are seeing the limitations to what can happen when he's neither your primary rim protector or wing defender, on how that can float an entire defense, because he's just best suited in a role where, and they have tried him in more different capacities this year, but because he's not a primary something, his impact can be, I don't want to say somewhat muted, but it's not going to lift up. And it had, by the way, it's lifted up the Bucks defense in certain lineups. So I'm not arguing that, but it's the way that Rudy Gobert can lift up the Timberwolves defense. And he has a ton of good defenders around him, but look, dating back to his time with Utah, or look at what Anthony Davis is doing with the Lakers, who are finally better defensively, statistically, with him on the floor. Hashtag that's what happens when maybe you play a little bit less with Cam Reddish and Taurean Prince. But we're seeing, because, and it might be the way Giannis is used and less about what he can't do. But I do think that's kind of what ended up separate. Like, the offense is just, I think you can make the case, even though there's been awkwardness between him and Dame and that dynamic, Giannis has never been better or more deferential as a passer. So like, he's even continued to grow in his offensive game. He's cut out a lot of the, he has some counters from the perimeter, but like, he's kind of cut out those shots where you're not seeing as many pull-up threes or those junky pull-up twos. So I think he had a very strong case. Like, it was a 4-player race to me, but I think the way that Luka ascended, what the Jokic and the Nuggets did after he sent that text message over the All-Star break, that really kind of sealed the deal. But again, I would listen if someone wanted to make a case for Giannis. That's the other thing, is I try to keep an open mind. I might not agree with it. If you want to make a case for Giannis over all these guys, I'll absolutely listen. And because we're talking about these 4 specifically, and maybe even Jalen Brunson, I might not have a concrete argument against you. I can explain where I'm coming from. And that's what should be fun about the MVP debate, is the fact that it is open for interpretation is good, but it also fuels the toxicity where, is it best player on the best team? What does value actually mean to certain people? Is it, well, imagine pulling this guy off the roster. How bad would they be? And so it has to go to that guy. And that's why that's been another one of Luka's primary arguments. It's like, have you seen like the Nuggets' on-off splits with Jokic for like the past 80 years? So it's a mess, but it's also really fun when you're having it with people. When Grant and I get to do it, I enjoy that discussion. And then it's just, we don't look at the comments or like the reaction as much to it unless it's positive, because someone's always going to be upset.
Yeah, funny counter to that interpretation of who should be the MVP is the way we select the MVP in the ABA league, the original league where Nikola Jokic used to play back in the day. We just take the numbers, production numbers of the players. We don't even take in the number of wins into the account, and we say this guy had the most, like the highest PER of all the guys in the league. So this is why he is the MVP. You know what? We're never wrong, and nobody's talking about it. And the thing the NBA wants for everybody to talk about it because it makes the machine. Uh, 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 machine's wheel spin. Okay, let's take one short break and then we'll do another segment on Denver Nuggets. I have a couple of questions for you about them before we get to our big announcement of who is winning every playoff series up until the end of these playoffs and who will be the champion based on that. So don't go anywhere. Okay, then. So before we get to the meat on the bone of today's show, I wanted to pick your brain about the Nuggets for a couple of minutes. First of all, for those who don't remember, you predicted a Nuggets championship last year, and you were 100% right about that. It's kind of
It
Miami,
wasn't
I
as
guess.
satisfying as I thought it would be. I remember because I took like a mini victory lap on Twitter just for calling, but like, people don't remember when you're not the first one, right? But let's say when you're earlier, you were one of the few people that picked the Nuggets because I don't know who else nationally picked the Nuggets. They'll remember when you're wrong, though.
Yeah, of
So if
course.
the Nuggets don't win the title this year, I'm sure I'll get a bunch of pushback for that one.
So this year you predicted their repeat, right?
Yeah, they were my title pick at the beginning of the season. I think I had them over Milwaukee in the finals, and I do not trust Milwaukee to get to the finals. But if that ends up being the matchup, I'll feel exceedingly confident in my Nuggets pick overall.
Yes. So this time around, I don't think you were the sole guy to predict the Nuggets championship. I mean, when they get one, suddenly people realize it is possible, and even those people who think that the Celtics are overwhelming favorites will tell you that it will be extremely difficult to win against the team with a lot of continuity, even though they've lost Bruce Brown, and for some reason they also mention Jeff Green every time. How would you compare your confidence in the Nuggets at the beginning of the season to now?
I probably feel even more confident, to be honest with you. And I know that maybe that feels weird coming off of that Spurs game, but that's one of 82.
Yeah.
They didn't go through, and that was part of my concern last year. And I promised myself if they went through another slump this year, so late in the season, I wouldn't be concerned. But they didn't really. Like they've had their nights where it just feels like they're off, but they're top 3 in offense, top 5 in defense since the All-Star break. And so I'm more confident in that. And the weird thing is, while this could be painted as a weakness, I feel a lot more confident in their bench than I thought I would. I was low on the Reggie Jackson stuff at the beginning of the year. I'm slightly higher on
So
that.
was I.
Right. And even like where Christian Brown, where it feels like, yes, he's been better lately and for a while, but his offensive start was very uneven. Peyton Watson shooting like 17% from 3 since the All-Star break or whatever it is. So you have questions. And even just like the Peyton Watson, like from game to game, it feels like his impact can swing towards any end of the spectrum almost unpredictably. And so like you do have there's like a level of uncomfortability there, but I feel like they've really discovered themselves in those Aaron Gordon as the backup big units. And I even think that some of their lineups where it's, well, we're going to surround those units with as many starters as possible. And like, we're just going to lean on Jokic to prop up some of the bench heavier mobs, maybe even bench heavier than they have been in the past. This just feels like a team that understands itself better than it ever has. And to just know that like on the court, Michael Porter Jr., you understand what he is now at both ends of the floor, and that this is someone who, yeah, even if he kind of goes through his upward and downward swings, when you look at his shot making, the fact that he has conceded so much of what could be a more prominent role has really worked out well for this team, and is so dangerous because it's, as Grant said on one of our recent podcasts, where it's just like the Nuggets are dangerous in a vacuum, but then you realize that there's this level to Michael Porter Jr. where it's not just him hitting threes, it's by virtue of him being on the floor, they can become this entirely different animal during the games that he's on. And so I think in net, in sum, I'm more confident, probably measurably so, in the Nuggets than I was at the beginning of the season. And I was pretty confident. And the final thing to do with that, too, is someone else kind of needs to prove it to me in the West. And I think Minnesota and OKC are certainly legit. I do worry about OKC's size, and there's some people, I don't care too much about it, but there is the experience factor. And also just Mark Daigneault has never had to shrink his rotation. Like, that's just been a dude that plays 16 out of 15 guys, 14 out of 13 guys every single night, basically. So I'm curious to see how they deal with that adjustment. And then with Minnesota, there's just still questions about their offense. It's great for them that they're going to have Karl-Anthony Towns back. What is he going to look like long-term coming back from that meniscus injury? And can their offense sustain a high enough, consistent enough peak in the playoffs? And then just like, I thought the Clippers might have been not sneaky, but they were on a tear for basically half the year. But their transition defense has been poor all season, and it seems to have infected the rest of their defense at this point too. And then, of course, I'm pretty sure, based off what I know, they're doing this as a precaution, but sitting Kawhi because of the knee stuff, that's something that we're going to have to monitor. People want to make the Lakers or the Warriors happen, and maybe they have some interesting peaks, but we have this evidence, and including with Phoenix, of 81 games now, these teams are telling you what they are. And I think it's been pretty clear in the West, as brutal as it is, the Nuggets are still just head and shoulders above everybody else, even if you think there's a couple problematic matchups potentially on the docket.
So I think we agree that that Western Conference is a lot better than its Eastern counterpart this season, and not only this season. And that probably, partly caused Boston's huge tally of wins compared to everybody else. Would you say that West is actually stronger this season compared to the last one, or is it just some teams rising while some other completely disappearing from contention? The Nuggets were 16-4 in the playoffs last year, or 12-3 in the West. How realistic is it for them to get out of the West with only 3 losses this season?
Oh, I would say I'd be shocked if they did it, and very impressed, just because you could boil it down to this. The Clippers are healthier, the Pelicans are healthier, the Timberwolves are healthier, and Oklahoma City has just reached another gear. And so even if you think, okay, the Lakers and the Warriors have kind of faded and the Suns are underachieving, one of those 3 teams can probably still make some noise, assuming the Warriors and Lakers even get, or the Suns for that matter, who are still in play-in contention, actually get to the postseason. But I think just by virtue of looking at what this version of the Clippers could be and what this version of the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, and the Thunder already are, that this playoff bracket should in theory be much more difficult for Denver to navigate than last year's.
One small question about the Nuggets roster this season. Who was your biggest positive and biggest negative surprise on Nuggets roster this season? I know the positive one because I listened to all of your shows, but you can repeat it anyway.
You know who my positive surprise is? Because I was thinking about this question when you sent it to me, and it's like, I don't know that anyone's like super duper shocked or disappointed me on this roster. I know that they've been trying to make Zeke Naji happen for what feels like a decade, but I never expected that to be this huge thing. If I'll start with the disappointment, I really thought, if you would have asked me at the beginning of the year, I thought we might have seen more from Julian Strawther this season, just because of the movement shooting that he can provide. I thought he might have played a more integrate role, and certainly would have thought that he hit his 3-pointers at a higher clip. I'm still pretty high on him moving forward, but that surprised me a little bit. And then with the Nuggets, in terms of who's been like the most pleasantly surprising player, I think I guess most people would say Peyton Watson, but I still kind of think it's Michael Porter Jr. Just there's still more of the level of consistency, even if it can be somewhat erratic sometimes, to his defense, to his rebounding. And I think that he is more comfortable in the skin that the Nuggets have him wearing on offense, where there's not as much freelancing or attempting to deviate from the script. And him and Michael Malone definitely seem like they're on the same page after we feel like a couple of years of just awkwardness. And I don't know how much injuries to both him and the rest of the roster had to do with that. So I think those would be my picks. But this is, again, a team, and that's not even like patting myself on the back. It's really just like we kind of understood what they were, what they could be. And there were times during the stretch of the season where I thought Christian Brown was going to be maybe my biggest disappointment on the roster, but they've kind of just progressed to this dominant normal. And so I had a tough time, not just identifying a disappointment, but even a surprise because of how good we already knew that they were.
Yeah, I agree with your pick of Julian Strother. I will try to defend his case because he missed a big chunk of the season with the injury, and also I think Michael Malone would get an ulcer if he was the third rookie playing this season. Next to, I mean, I know Christian Brown is a second-year player, and Peyton Watson is formally a second-year player as well, but he is really a rookie this season. So if he had to deal with chaos of three super young guys on the team, I don't think we would have Michael Malone alive for the for the for the playoffs. So it's probably for the best, and I think Julian still has a really good chance of getting into a better role next season. Of course, I agree also on Michael Porter. I know he's your most improved player on the Nuggets in your big podcast about most improved players from each team. So yeah, I'm really happy about Michael. For the end of this segment, we have one listener submitted question, and if you want your question answered on the show, you have to become a Patreon supporter on patreon.com/MiroslavCuk. This question is from Peter Martin Plummer. He asked, Dan, how the heck are you doing? Oh, no, sorry. That's for a different show. Peter's question is, what is your one biggest concern about the Nuggets in the upcoming playoffs?
So I think it might be the rebounding in the non-Jokic minutes, because we've seen, you could say the non-Jokic minutes in general, but that just feels like low-hanging fruit. And those minutes the non-Jokic minutes will presumably shrink to like 8 a game, 10 a game at most in the playoffs. But it's just, they're so small in that, like when you have Aaron Gordon as your 5, and the defensive rebounding rate during those minutes is really low. And just overall without Jokic, I think their defensive rebounding rate drops by almost 8 points. And so if you're going to go up against teams like Minnesota or even New Orleans, if that's a matchup they see, against just, in those 6, 8, 10 minutes that Jokic isn't on the court, I would be curious to see, okay, like what kind of happens there when you already know that probably your offense isn't already going to be as good. And so one of the things you can control aside from playing good defense is ensuring that you're ending the possessions of your opponents when you're on the defensive end. And so that would just be something to monitor, I think, again, especially depending on how the matchups pan out. And I will say, this is obviously a later round thing. I know a lot of people don't think that OKC has the size or strength to hang with the Nuggets. They've done a much better job of rebounding out of the All-Star break. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I think it was, I think it was Grace of What's in the NBA Game podcast, which they just launched. I listened to their first episode. It was really good. So people should check it out. But she had mentioned that she thinks it has a lot to do with, okay, like they're playing Kenrich or they're playing big Jalen Williams with the Chet Holmgren. I also think the wings and the guards have done a better job boxing out. And so if that's happening during minutes when Jokic is off the floor, that's maybe another team that could give them problems. But we're splitting hairs here when it's what's the biggest concern. I mean, like you could point to, everything's a cliche. It's, well, do you trust Reggie Jackson to kind of be the backup point guard? And the answer is yes, because he's going to play a lot of his minutes with Jokic at this point anyway. I think the other thing you could point to is, will there be any sort of wild, incoherent swings from the youngsters that you are depending on, looking at Christian Brown's offense, Peyton Watson's shooting, or just his continuity on the defensive end? So you can point to that, but I think just the rebounding during the non-Jokic minutes would be something that I'd be, because like you could play Zeke, he's not going to help your rebounding either. So, and I mean, DeAndre Jordan, how many playoff minutes do you want to see from DeAndre Jordan?
Yeah, but not many, and I always kid around with Jeff Green's minutes from last season's playoffs, but the reality is he is a big body, and you need a beefy guy here and there in your rotation. And truth is, if they can pull off playing all of Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter, and Peyton Watson as your front court when Nikola Jokic is not on the court, then that might work rebounding wise. But if you try to play Peyton Watson exclusively at the 4, that might be too thin in certain matchups. So I agree with you that rebounding might be an issue in non-Jokic minutes for sure. Okay, let's take. I hope Peter is happy with your answer. Let's take one more short break, and then we'll get into some time traveling. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back, and then only 15 total games are left in the regular season. Every team is going to play in about 20 hours, and only then we will know which team holds which seed for the playoff bracket. But waiting sucks. Or as Homer Simpson said to Moe when Moe got the army grade fryer for the bar that can fry an ox in 40 seconds, Homer said, 40 seconds? But I want it now. So instead of waiting, I'm going to give you tomorrow's winners right now, since I've visited Biff in Back to the Future Part 2. And based on that, the definitive seeds for the playoffs. By the way, Biff had a lot of help from Matt Moore's tweets. That guy was burning rubber all night after the second to last games
He's
of
a
the regular
true
season.
tiebreaker playoff scenario sicko. I like the chaos of it. Sorry to interject very quickly. I can't bring when there's this many scenarios in play, and this has happened now because of the play-in tournament. I'm not gonna stress about them because it's just going to expire, and then we're eventually gonna have this bracket set. And so I can't. I like reading about it and seeing other people go through the logistical pretzel twists of it all. I couldn't bring myself to do it because it's so much work and brain power on something that's just going to then all of a sudden be settled. And you've now thought about it, like, especially heading into the last day of the season where it's right, like we're gonna know all this stuff, with the exception of a couple like actual playoff matchups, but we're gonna know all the seedings at that point at the end of Sunday. And so I can't spend like the way you're doing it is correct. I was like, let's just pencil in what you think is going to happen, and I won't predict the playoff bracket from there.
Yeah, well, these 24 hours are Matt's Super Bowl, and I really appreciate him for that because he made my job so much easier with his, full solutions. So these are the 15 games. I predicted Nets versus 76ers. 76ers are going to win. Bucks versus Magic. I actually originally predicted Bucks to win, but then you told me that Bucks don't have
that Doc Rivers was still their head coach, and you were like, "Oh yeah, good point."
And they also don't have Giannis, and they probably, might rest Dame Lillard as well. Bulls, Knicks. I predicted Knicks winning. Raptors, Heat winning. Hawks, Pacers winning. Hornets, Cavs winning, and Wizards, Celtics winning. And now let's get to the real conference. Blazers, Kings winning. Rockets, Clippers winning. Jazz, Warriors win. Pistons, Spurs, who cares? Mavs, Thunder wins. Lakers, Pelicans. Actually, Adam Mares didn't like this pick, but I don't care. Pelicans winning against the Lakers. I just need Lakers to lose tomorrow. Then Suns, Wolves, Suns winning, and Nuggets, Grizzlies, Nuggets winning, and that will bring us. Let me just take the second slide. Hopefully, yeah, here it is. So this is what the 10 seeds in each conference would look before the play-in. And my prediction was also that Suns would win seed number 7 over Kings. Lakers win over Warriors in the 9-10 game, and then Lakers winning the 8th seed against the Kings. And in the Eastern Conference, if anybody cares, Heat winning 7 against the Sixers, which is a bit hot, I have to admit. Bulls winning over the Hawks in the 9-10 game, and then Sixers getting 8th seed over the Bulls. So now let me try to stop. Okay, I just need one more. And Here it is. So can you see the bracket now?
Oh, I can see it. Yeah.
You can see it. Okay. That means that probably everybody else can see it too. So this is the bracket that we would get in that case. So Thunder at number 1 playing against Lakers. And their second round matchup would be a winner of Clippers versus Mavericks. And then Nuggets playing the Suns in 2-7 game. And their second round matchup being Wolves versus Pelicans. So let's go one series at a time. What would you expect from a Thunder Lakers series, Dan?
That's probably, I don't want to use the word nightmare, but that's not the matchup I think the Thunder would want because they have had some issues against the Lakers this year. I think I'd still go Thunder in just, I want to say 5, but I'm going to go with, I'm going to go 6. I think, first of all, LeBron James is still amazing. People were mad that I had him on second team All NBA, and I think he's been that good. The offensive versatility of the Thunder, and there's a lot of stuff that AD could shut down, but the Lakers defense has been pretty bad as their offense has surged up. A lot of that, people like to blame on Darvin Ham, and they've had Anthony Davis and just the entire defense inexplicably conceding open jumpers to teams that are lethal jump shooting teams. And the Thunder, just with the way they space the floor in their driving kick game, I think the offense, even if the Lakers can play with the way LeBron's been driving and hitting his threes and the way that Anthony Davis, he's kind of hitting jumpers now, and the stuff that he can, do as a play finisher, they could maybe, get through some teeth of the Thunder defense. But you just have to look. I think the reason to pick the Lakers would be they have LeBron and the Thunder just don't have a ton of playoff experience. And Shea's been to the playoffs before. I can't bring myself to that. That would be one to circle where it's, I could kind of see it going wrong and not go chalk, but I would go Thunder.
I really like this pick because I had a tweet a couple of weeks ago and I said that let's not overthink the matchups. The Thunder are just a much better team than the Lakers. And I also would expect Thunder to win this series. I also got a lot of bookmarks for that tweet. So people are waiting in the trenches for me to lose on this one, which I might actually lose. Okay, second matchup, Clippers versus the Mavericks. This is actually the only matchup that is really set right now. 4-5. Where would you go with this one?
I don't know if this is prisoner of the moment stuff. I think it's Mavericks in 6. There's just, and I know you're not even putting games up there, so I shouldn't even chain myself to like the specific positions. They've been on one since the trade deadline, which I'm in this weird space where I still would not have made those moves if I'm Dallas. And that's, if you make it to the conference finals or win a title, then yeah, I'm going to look like an idiot. But I was also clearly wrong about the impact those guys were going to have. Daniel Gafford's been fantastic for them. And I think the bigger thing is PJ Washington hitting threes now, by the way. But the bigger thing has been his defense, where it looked like he was basically in a similar defensive role in Charlotte. If not, he had a little bit more cover because of Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges being there. And he looked overtaxed, and he goes to Dallas where he's just their primary wing or star checker now a lot of the time. I know they have Dante Exum, Derrick Jones Jr., and he looks great there. And Luka plays faster. Him and Kyrie are playing well off each other. This team seems like a team that's kind of peaking at the right time. And then with the Clippers, I assume Kawhi will be healthy enough, but I don't know how you can trust their defense. And then we got to kind of factor in, have we just forgotten about the James Harden playoff resume that we saw in Houston, that we saw predominantly in Philly? We didn't really see too much of it in Brooklyn. So I feel like this is wrong, like to say, because the Clippers they looked like they might have been the best team in the league for like 30 something games. But I'm going to go Mavs here. I'm going to ride that recency bias wave.
I completely agree with this pick. I might even go with Mavericks in 5, but Mavericks in 6 is fine. Okay, so earlier today I mentioned that I actually expect the Nuggets to play against the Suns in the first round, and I got some Nuggets fans panicking about this one. But are you gonna throw a bit of cold water on that kind of panic?
I understand why people might not want to see the Suns in the first round as a Nuggets fan. This would be a Nuggets in 5 for me. I just don't view that team. I don't think has the defensive peak, even if they're going to play a bunch of Royce O'Neal, even if they decide to bring Josh Okogie back into the fold. They just can't. They're not going to be able to shut down the Nuggets offense and their own offense, even if you think that, like, first of all, the Nuggets have the bodies to go after Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. Like, even if you think that they'll figure out stuff, the Suns have been masters of self-sabotage, especially in fourth quarters, especially later in games. I do think from what I've seen and listened to and read, they've gotten a little more creative down the stretch, but like just not enough to where it's too many times it's, can you find a more creative way to get Kevin Durant the ball other than just giving it to him? Can you involve all your stars, or at least two of your stars, in the same offensive possession? And then just the turnover issues that they've had, they haven't been able, and it's changed a little bit, but it's just wild and honestly inexplicable. They go from like one of the best wide open jump shooting teams in the league through the first 3 quarters to like one of the 3 or 5 worst last time I checked in the fourth quarter. So based off what we've seen this season, I don't know why. I guess I understand why. There's Kevin Durant, there's Devin Booker, there's Bradley Beal, who's done some more point guardy things. I understand why you would, like, you don't want to face those guys in the first round, but I just think there are a lot worse matchups for the Nuggets than this one.
Yes, I agree with this. Nuggets in 5. Yeah, that feels right. Okay, last first round matchup in the West: Wolves against the Pelicans.
So I will say, if you're a Nuggets fan, you have to like this matchup, because I do think these are 2 teams that could give the Nuggets problems. So if one of them is going to cannibalize the other in the first round, that almost makes you feel a little better. I would pick the Wolves just by virtue of their top end talent there. And I do worry about their offense, but their defense, like, okay, who are you going to stick on Zion Williamson necessarily as the Wolves? But like having Rudy Gobert's rim protection and Karl Anthony Towns, the girthiness of him, like you can at least understand that he, like, a body to throw on Zion. If you have Rudy behind him, it makes it a little bit more palatable. And just there's a chance that I think they have the better chance of having the best player in the series with Anthony Edwards versus a Zion Williamson. In part, that's not because I think lowly of Zion, but the Pelicans have this weirdness to where they get away, it feels like, from what works on offense. And I'm not just talking about point Zion. It just feels like Ingram was playing, I would argue, the most complimentary basketball of his career before his most recent injury, like playing off Zion well or not needing to dominate the ball as much. But then sometimes they just go away from it. And it's just bizarre to me. Now, I do think Willie Green's explored some interesting extremes where he's yanked Jonas Valanciunas, and could that, cause some matchup issues if they actually decided that they wanted to run a little smaller against the Wolves? You look at the top 6, 7 guys, if everyone's healthy on Minnesota, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid coming off the bench, they just have more levers to pull. And assuming that Karl Anthony Towns is even a semblance of himself, I think I'll go Wolves in 6, because I really like the Pelicans. They are the team that if you told me that they emerged from the Western Conference, like, there's just of any dark horse that you want to talk about just coming out of their conference, the Pelicans would shock me the least, because I do think that at their pinnacle, they've been that dangerous. We've just never seen them sustain that pinnacle for more than, like, I don't know. I mean, we've seen the regular season for weeks at a time, but we've never seen this group together in the postseason yet. Like, that's still information we're waiting to see.
Yeah, I believe Wolves are actually better against the Pelicans without the Karl Anthony Towns, and they need actually him for the Nuggets series that is coming in the second round according to this bracket. Okay, let's just fast forward through the East first round, because I actually respect only like 2 teams among these 8. So Boston Sixers.
This might actually be the most
interesting one.
It's the most interesting one because Embiid's back, and just Boston gets weird in the playoffs. Like the year they were behind 0-3, and then they forced a game 7, or last year when it looked like they were going to cave against the Sixers and didn't. I'd still go Boston. I'll just go Boston in 6. Let's just say their late game offense ends up costing them 2 games. But that's the most interesting, or I guess a Bucks Nick. Oh no, that's Bucks Heat. Yeah, that's the most interesting matchup on the board, I think, ironically.
Yeah. Let's first go to Cavs versus Magic.
Oh man, I'm gonna go Cavs, and that's like maybe against my better judgment. We'll say Cavs in 5. It just feels the Magic's offenses. The Cavs have not looked great on offense lately, but the Magic's offenses, they do have better spacing than advertised. But like things can get ugly there. They need functional shooting to really change the way that defenses are guarding their best players. And as bad as the Cavs have been, JB Bickerstaff, I think, has done a good job of saying, you know what, I will play only one big when it matters most if I have to. So let's just assume that carries over into the postseason.
Yeah, Magic better hope they win tomorrow against um, the Bucks, because if they don't, they can drop all the way to the eighth seed. And if your top guys are shooting like 7 of 24 games like that, like they are recently, it's not going to be nice for them. Okay, Bucks Heat, super interesting. I really want to hear this one.
I'm gonna go Bucks because I do still think that when you just look at the minutes, I'd say Bucks in 5. I just don't. I'm gonna probably look like excuse me, I was almost gonna curse. I'm gonna look like an idiot if the Heat go to the finals again, because I keep talking about how, and I can't explain the Heat when they do that. Giannis's injury looms. Like if you look at just the Bucks's core 4 when they're on the court, they're just steamrolling opponents. And so if all 4 of them are gonna play, even with Chris Middleton regressing on defense, even seeing a little regression from Brook Lopez, they're like, I still believe they're the biggest threat to Boston in the East, but that might just be my stubborn belief in Giannis more than anybody else. And that's, and by the way, that's assuming, if anyone's listening to this, I'm assuming that Giannis is going to play. And if he doesn't, I'm probably picking the Heat, but I will say the Bucks offense, when Dame is played without Giannis in games where he's playing with their top end talent and they're kind of like 5 out instead of 4 out, basically, it hasn't been bad. And so I think I would still pick them to beat the Heat, even if they don't have Giannis.
Yeah, for the record, I'm picking the Heat here, but Dan is the guest, so
you're picking. I'm sorry. I know you want to. You need to explain this
against the Bucks. It's just that the Heat are a playoff team. They're not a regular season team, and the Bucks have so much potential of imploding. Plus, Giannis might not be available at all, or
if they lose a second straight series to the Heat because of a Giannis injury, that's going to be wild.
Yeah, availability, man, is more important than ever in the NBA history. I truly believe that, and Giannis is not considered a guy that is not available in a similar manner like Joel Embiid. But man, he's had some injury stuff in playoffs.
I just haven't seen enough from the Heat's offense this season to trust them.
I agree.
I know Jimmy Butler's talked about how he's like a nuclear playoff MFer, and I get it, but it also makes me uncomfortable. If I was a fan, like I understand it, you want to see your guys play their best when it matters most, but you're sitting there saying that the regular season just doesn't matter. And so what are they sitting through for 82 games? That's a complete aside to this, but
it's just that they already did it last year, so
and the year before that, like and in 2020. So
we do have some film on it. We'll see. But by the way, I would be picking Heat to get all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, if not further. But that's just me.
I'm sorry, that is a blasphemous, Miroslav. That is if your justification is there's alien shit going on in Miami, I'll respect it.
It's Eric Spoelstra. This is the reason. This is the biggest reason for me, and I might look like an idiot. I will most probably look like an idiot for saying this, but if I'm not wrong, that I'm in the cream of people who are also
you're gonna look like a genius predicting. If they go on another tear. Yeah,
we're gonna look like a bunch of geniuses. Shout out Swipa. Okay, last pair: Knicks versus Pacers.
This is an interesting matchup. I'm gonna go with the Knicks I'm gonna say 6. I know we've seen some better like defensive efforts from the Pacers this side of the Pascal Siakam trade, and that Tyrese Haliburton seems like he might be rounding in the form. But I do believe that they're still going through a level of self-discovery that's gonna hurt them in the playoffs, to where they have Tyrese Haliburton playing more off the ball and he's doing it, but you might need to figure out that dynamic more and need a training camp and an off season to maybe go out and get more complementary talent for it. So I will go Knicks in 6. This is predicated though that OG Anunoby he's been playing, but he's always dealing with something. And he will I think he's injured every part of his body, and like it's always just random, and it's in like the most bizarre situations. It's like OG Anunoby went to the DMV and pulled a hamstring or something like that. So but if he's playing, I think the Knicks in 6 for that one.
I agree with this pick. Okay, let's take the last short break for this show, and then we'll wrap up with the most important series of these playoffs. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. Second round of the Western Conference Finals of Western Conference. Thunder versus Mavericks. Where do you go with this? This one.
God, this is.
It is tough.
I'm gonna say. Oh my God, am I gonna pick the Mavericks? No, I'm gonna pick the Thunder. I did smash the Thunder's under preseason, so that doesn't look too great. I'm gonna go with the Thunder. I think that I know the Mavs have been playing great defense, but they just have so many different looks to throw at the Mavericks defensively. And I know there's the element of Luka can make it that it doesn't matter, but they might actually run into some issues if the Thunder are, Chet Holmgren's your 5. Let's say they're not going to play. And even if they're playing him and Jay Will together, they just get to play 5 out. And so I do think that the idea of PJ Washington and Maxi Kleber does give the Mavs a card to play there. But how many minutes can you get from that? It's not something they've leaned upon necessarily a bunch since the trade deadline. And so I do think that defensively, maybe having PJ Washington helps, where you can throw PJ Washington on Chet Holmgren and have Daniel Gafford sit home. But I just think that the Thunder's offense in its totality could do some, let's just say, like awkward things or unsolvable things to the Mavs' defense.
Look at the Thunders go. So, how many games?
I'll say 7. That feels like it'd be a really good series.
Okay, the first one we got of the sort. Second pair, Nuggets versus Wolves.
I think it's just Nuggets in 6. I know there is stuff that Minnesota can do to Denver's offense specifically, especially because I guess Denver kind of plays into this a little bit because they're a team that they're methodical because of like they can get up the floor, but like they're going to be methodical in the half court. And that almost kind of plays into what Minnesota wants to do against them. And having just like they can get to a point where they have 5 above average defenders on the court, which can make life very difficult. And if Aaron Gordon isn't shooting or making threes, that's going to give them another element to explore and make gambos on the defensive end. I do think Aaron Gordon, who I do not trust as a 3-point shooter, surprise, surprise, I think he at least makes good decisions with the ball, aside from shooting, that they'll be able to counteract that. And also, if that's not an Aaron Gordon series, I think the Wolves offense is, even with Karl-Anthony Towns, is not dynamic enough for the Nuggets to necessarily think about, okay, like if we need to play some minutes where like Aaron Gordon isn't logging, or play some games where he's not logging as many minutes, so that we can kind of ensure that our offense is going to be operating at or near its zenith. They can go that route. And so I ultimately just think there are more cards for the Nuggets to play their offense against the Wolves' defense than there are for even the Wolves' offense to go out and play against the Nuggets' defense.
Yes, I obviously agree with this pick. Thunder Nuggets is going to be great Western Conference Finals. But before that, second round in the East, Boston versus Cavs. So this is Boston in how many games?
That's Boston in 4.
4.
I love so many of the individual pieces on the Cavs, and I love so much of what they can do collectively, but it's not happening right now. Donovan Mitchell doesn't look right. Darius Garland's been super weird. And if you go to Boston and you decide that you can't play both your bigs, you're playing right into the way that they want to play then. So that's my probably spiciest take. Like Cleveland should steal at least the game, but I'm just going to say Boston in 4.
No, they're not. Okay. Bucks, Knicks. Do it.
I'm going to pick the Knicks. I'm just like, that's probably a homerism here, but I'm really only going this route because of the uncertainty. We know Julius Randle's not going to be playing for the Knicks, and they will miss that. But Bojan Bogdanovic has come on a little bit. Tibbs is leaning on him more. Tibbs has gotten more creative with the lineups he's running. And just the Giannis calf strain thing just looms for me. You can say, and like the Knicks, not that they have the antidote to Giannis, but they now have, and I would argue just Julius Randle's body gave you someone to throw at Giannis if you wanted to, but like now you just have OG if you want someone to go and guard Giannis, and you have these guys who can at least chase around Dame. Jalen Brunson tries. You have Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo flies right. You have Deuce. What if Steph Curry could win Defensive Player of the Year, McBride, on your roster as well that you can throw at them. So I'll say Knicks in 7. And this is, if you told me that Giannis is going to be Giannis, I reserve the right to change this pick, but I'm just going to assume that Giannis won't be Giannis if he's playing.
Okay, Boston Knicks in the Knickerbockers. Sorry, in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'm liking this matchup for the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals against the Thunder. How about you?
Yeah, that's Nuggets in 5. I do think that the Thunder could, if they're going to rebound like they have, they could do some pesky stuff. This is just like not an ideal matchup for them still.
Okay, so yes, you said that you would be hugely surprised if the Nuggets would be going 12-3 against West in the playoffs, and you picked them going 12-4. So that that matches up. That matches up. Boston versus Knicks.
Boston in 6. That's just like I know the Knicks just beat the Celtics, and their front court's different now with OG Anunoby and even Isaiah Hartenstein getting more minutes than Mitchell Robinson. But the Knicks have looked wildly uncomfortable when the Celtics have Kristaps Porzingis on the floor, and just he can bend your defense to the point of breaking it, even with OG Anunoby there, even with Isaiah Hartenstein on the court, even if the Knicks decide to play. I mean, they do play smaller than they have in the past. So Boston's just, I get why some people don't trust them. I totally understand it. But like at some point, the talent has to win out. And you can honestly, I love Jalen Brunson, but as their only legitimate, like off the dribble shot creator, if Bojan Bogdanovic or Alec Burks, God forbid, is your second best option there, you're going to run into some issues. And the Celtics do what I think is underrated is Jaylen Brown's season. There is a chance, I'm not saying I'd predict it, but there's a chance that Boston ends up having the 2 best players in that series. And that's just not something that you can overcome.
This was a great exercise so far. So it is time to crown our champions for the 2024 season.
I mean, I'm just going to say Nuggets in 7 because I have to stay loyal to my championship pick. I'm not as phased ironically, about the Nuggets defending Boston. It's just like when you have KCP, when you have playoff Jamal Murray, the way he's defended in the postseason in years past. Let's hope he doesn't defend like he did in that Spurs game, though. And you have Aaron Gordon, and you have the cards of playing, okay, if this isn't a Michael Porter Jr. series, we have Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. I almost do worry about what the Boston defense could maybe do to the Nuggets offense. And like they have a bunch of different levers to pull, whether it's playing Porzingis and Al Horford together, or whether it's going with just one of those guys and then throwing out Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Jason Tatum. And like, there's just, I worry about that a little bit, but the Nuggets have operated at a level that I can't fathom or understand a lot in real time, where they just have, you bust up 1-2 actions. Okay, well, they have plans C through Z already in the bank. And those contingencies are just so deep. They're endless. That would be a hell of a series. And from a fan's perspective, if there's not going to be a chaotic outcome where it's like, why are the Pelicans and the Magic in the finals right now? Like, that would be hysterical. If we're going to get sort of this chalk matchup, I would love to see this. I think it would just be, and I know it's not chalk relative to the way our bracket shook out, but we're just going to get, like, I think that would be a hell of a series. And if we're rooting for the best possible product, I think Nuggets Celtics is the matchup that you want to see.
There you go, my dear listener. I know many people were panicking last night after that Spurs game.
I'm dying in I'm actually just looking at the comments right now. I can't. Vladislav, don't read into regular season matchups. I don't care if they're playing their playoff rotations. If there's anything I've learned after over a decade of covering this league, 2 games, 4 games is in the regular season, sometimes in the dead middle of the regular season. It is not representative of what's going to happen in the postseason. So it's fine that you want to look. The Celtics are often worse in the playoffs. That's a more legitimate argument than the Nuggets beat the Celtics twice in the regular season, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and you've just heard Dan Favale predicting the Nuggets to win a championship, and for what it's worth, I'm also predicting that as well. So sleep a little more calmly before next Saturday or Sunday, whenever they will play the first game. God, I hope it's Sunday because I'm arriving Saturday late in Denver.
Oh, you're gonna be
next
in
week.
Denver. That's dope.
I will be there. I will be there. So it would really be cool if the league would answer my letters and move the Nuggets to Sunday, so I can attend the first game too. Okay, so for the end, as promised on the Patreon page of this show, I'm giving a special shout out to the sole member of the top subscriber tier, or as I call it, the sicko tier, on patreon.com/MiroslavCUK. He is the world's biggest Devin Booker hater and the author of the most extensive collection of Devin Booker jokes you can find on his Twitter timeline at Buckets. Bucket since '88. It's Peter Martin Plummer. Thanks, Pete. For the next 2 weekends, as I said, I'll be in Denver watching the start of the first round of the playoffs with the fellas. You can expect some short videos from me on top of the shows you'll hopefully be able to see me on. Also, for listeners from Serbia, a small plug: I will be on the morning show on RTS TV station on Monday around 9:30 a.m. So if you have nothing smarter to do, check it out. And then, before I take us out, do you have any closing thoughts or something to plug?
No, well, I guess I'm so bad at this. Yeah, I have. Go check out. You can find all my writing at Bleacher Report. I put up a lot of content there, and that I should probably promote more often than I do. And if you want to listen to more stuff about the NBA at large, I can't emphasize enough. I think Hardwood Knocks, my totally unbiased opinion, obviously, is one of the most underrated, comprehensive combination of personable, thorough, snarky, fun podcasts out there. So Hardwood Knocks, spelled like it sounds. Go check it out if you have not before.
I've been listening to that show for many
You're an
years
OG.
now.
I don't even know. Like, we have among the dozens of listeners that we have, you've been there from the beginning. So I appreciate you a bunch.
Yes, and the one line that connects all the seasons of Hardwood Knocks is Dan Favale. So give him a follow on Twitter if for any reason you're not following him already. So until next time, Emmanuel Mudiay.